Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic was a listener request, so it's super duper fun and awesome that we're getting more and more people sending in topics, so thank you. This one is on mindset, and we're talking about controlling cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone of the body, and if our cortisol runs too high for too long, it can cause negative health impacts, like high blood pressure. It can cause issues with retaining good amount of muscle, having too much water retention, maybe even messing with fat accumulation. So it can kind of just negatively impact our efforts on physical health. So what we're going to do, and I'm kind of skirting a little bit past the scienciness of it, because the person wanted to know how to control cortisol, which is a long topic that I'm going to get hopefully just introduced into, but it is a pretty in-depth topic. So in general, high cortisol levels staying sustainedly high for long periods of time are a bad thing. Why that happens is a lot of it is due to mental stress, just coping with maybe a job you hate, maybe tough family situation, just anything that causes us mental stress, mental discomfort that is sustained for a long period of time. So that can cause us issues and get cortisol levels to be high. We also have physical stress. So if somebody's dealing with a long-term injury, it can cause cortisol levels to be high. And then also we'll talk a little bit more about nutritional methods. So if somebody relies on a lot of caffeine, they eat a lot of sugar, and they don't sleep really well, that'll naturally cause your cortisol levels to be really high as well. And then we have hormonal stress. So if our healthy hormone profile is under attack, due to age or just stress or just craziness in life, that can cause cortisol levels to be very high. So I'll give you a couple quick little examples, okay? I've talked with males in their 20s who were dealing with extreme amounts of stress. So one male, for example, he was going through school, had a part-time job. He had two part-time jobs, going through school, which is pretty much a third part-time job. You just don't get paid for it. He was going through a divorce and had a young child. Holy freaking crap, that's a lot of stuff going on. So he told me he was getting into the gym, he was working out, but just wasn't seeing results, was tired and fatigued all the time, and just kind of getting run down. And I said, well, your training looks correct. Your nutrition looks correct, but you're not getting great results. I said, why don't you go get your blood checked? He got his blood test done, and males, a healthy male, should be somewhere between 800 to 1100 reading on testosterone level. And there's a whole bunch of nitty-gritty details. Let's just go with that for now. So just give me some leeway if you know more about this stuff to know that I'm trying to get to the point rather than arguing over these specific numbers. Okay, so let's just say the healthy levels are 800 to 1100. He was at 200 and something. So, which is abysmal. I mean, that's awful. Even for an 80-year-old dude, that would be awful. So, what we said was, he said, do you think I need to get on testosterone therapy? And I said, well, you know what? Hold on. I said, you're about to finish up this semester at school. And then he would have had summer break. And during summer break, he was hoping to get kind of custody issues worked out and kind of deal with a divorce issue. And what we found was, it was a month left of school. So it was 3 months after we talked, which would be a month after school, 2 months into the summer. All of a sudden, his natural testosterone levels were back up to, I think the 500s, low 600s, which still isn't great, but it showed how much just all the mental stress he was going through. And then whatever the physical stress would be related in terms of not getting a ton of sleep, odd sleeping hours, that kind of stuff. Food was probably garbage. In terms of he was eating clean foods, but his timing was all insane. So that's what I mean kind of by the physical stress. But anyhow, we found out that it made a big difference once he got rid of the mental and physical stress issues, or some of them. His hormonal stress got a lot better. So we've had other examples where I'll have somebody, a female, maybe in their late 40s, mid 40s, they're eating right, training right, so to speak, but they're not getting good results. So we'll go have them get blood checked, and we find out their hormones are way off. Cortisol is sky high because they have no testosterone. Like all these other numbers and stuff are all jacked up. They're getting night sweats and all this other stuff. So hormonal stress does cause an issue too. Okay, so we're going to look at mental stress, physical stress, and hormonal stress. And in each of these areas, what can we do to help control the stress, which will help us control our cortisol? Okay, so mental stress. One of the big things that causes mental stress, which raises cortisol, is the burden of worrying about a bunch of shit all day, every day. So in podcast 215, we talked about overcoming stress related to worry. So go ahead and listen to that podcast. It'll give you way more details than what I'm going to give you right now. But in a sense, we need to think to ourselves is, what am I worrying about? Okay, you'd make a list, a physical list if you want to, and it's actually recommended because it gets it off your brain. So it helps reduce worry because you don't feel like you have to hold on to all of it now. It's on paper, so you won't forget anything. If you look through that list, what can you do anything about? What can you control? What can you game plan for? How can you take action, like physical, actual actions, to reduce your mental worry? So often worry comes from us feeling unprepared or out of control. Well, if you take control or you take the time and efforts to be prepared, you can reduce your worry. It won't eliminate it necessarily, and that's probably highly unlikely, but it's absolutely going to lessen it and give you lowered worry levels, which will help you lower your kind of cortisol related to worry. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. So one of the things we recommend people do, and I actually do in my personal life, is weekly or daily planning. So at the end of every night, I will kind of takes me like 3 minutes-ish to plan my next day. I not only plan what I have to do, I plan when I'm going to do it. So it's not a to-do list in terms of like just a list of shit I need to somehow get done. I actually write in my calendar when I'm going to do this thing, when I'm going to do that thing. So that way I have the times allocated for it throughout the day, and I can better understand what's actually possible for me to get done tomorrow. So maybe I have a list of 10 things on my to-do list, but I look through my schedule and it looks like, man, I'm only going to be able to get 5 done tomorrow. You know, let me look at maybe the next day I can get 2 or 3 of them chopped off. Maybe the following day I'll be able to finally get the rest of them done. Well, then that gives me a sense of control, a sense of preparedness, and I can unload my brain from that stress and worry. So I do that each night for the next day. So that way, when I try to fall asleep, I don't feel like I have about a billion things running around through my head. So that helps a ton. And then I also have a thing I do per day that is a daily reflection, in a sense of like, okay, what did I do today? How was my plan effective? Where wasn't it effective? And what are the things I've learned from today that can help me do a better job tomorrow? So there's stuff like that. So that stuff sounds really corny, but it ridiculously man, does that make a difference? I'll tell you what. So it made a huge difference for me. And the people who I know who did it and I got the idea from, it makes a big difference for them as well. So if you're worried and that's causing you stress and that's causing you anxiety and you feel like that might be raising your cortisol, since that's what this person was exactly concerned about, is listen to podcast 215 about worry, understand of trying to identify what you can control, what you can plan for, and then go ahead and take the time and the efforts to plan for it and take control of it. Okay, that's going to help a lot. So another thing we have with mental stress is making sure that we balance the different areas of health. So if you're listening to this podcast, we talk a lot about physical health, okay, with nutrition and training. And then obviously with our mindset ones, we're hopefully talking about mental health. But there's also emotional health, relational health, spiritual health. Some people even put in like financial health, work health, stuff like that. There are different areas of health that if we are not paying attention to or don't feel like one of the areas is getting enough attention, or we feel like it's falling behind, or we feel it's inadequate, that can cause stress, mental stress, and that can raise our cortisol levels. So we have to make sure that we don't have an imbalance between these areas, okay? So which might lead to anxiety, depression, anger. So if we look at physical health, emotional health, mental health, relational health, spiritual health, what am I doing that allows me to address each of these areas? Am I doing some effort or giving some attention or some time to each of these areas in the amounts that is needed per area? So if I have 5 areas, it doesn't mean I need to give 20% to each. Okay, sometimes you have to focus a little more on one, some might need a little less attention. So in podcast 251, titled Drop the Right Ball, we talk about how to balance all this stuff and how it's never really in perfect balance. It's like juggling. Things are always moving. You're just trying to stay in control of the movement, but you're just never statically sitting still. Okay, so that's something we want to pay attention to is, do I feel like I'm always taking away my physical health so that way I can take care of the family? That's not good. That's going to lead to underlying depression about your physical state. Okay? You're also just going to have no energy by the end of the day. You're not going to feel happy when you go out to social events because you're going to feel self-conscious about your appearance. So all of a sudden it starts negatively impacting not only the physical health realm, but that starts seeping into negatively impacting our emotional, mental, relational health as well. So it's important that we take care of each area because each area is interlaced with the other areas. So I can't just completely get rid of one and think all other ones are going to flourish and be great. It isn't going to happen. They're all interconnected. So if you don't pay attention to one, you will negatively impact all of the others. So it's important to take the time to give some attention to each of the areas of health. So that's part of our weekly planning. So as you plan throughout your week, you can say, okay, what do I need to do for physical health this week? Okay, maybe I can find time to work out on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So that's going to give me a little bit of physical health. And then I know I can do this and this, like my breakfast this week might be this. I can make sure, like in physical health, we're going to talk a little bit about this like down in the podcast here, is like sleep is a part of your physical health. So are you taking the time to make sure you sleep? So maybe you can't sleep much during the week, but maybe on Saturday morning you can sleep in and be a lazy bum, okay? So that might be something that lets you, it's not ideal, but it helps you kind of have some ability of control or attention paid to your physical health. So you might want to include exercise, nutrition, and say sleep for physical health. Now there's a bunch of other stuff you can include, but that's pretty much the basics. Now emotional health. What do you need to feel emotionally healthy? Sometimes people need me time, personal time. They need to get the hell away from everybody else so that way they can recharge. Some people recharge around other people, but maybe in a happy environment rather than our normal day-to-day kind of stressful stuff. So they might plan a fun event on a Saturday. Like I'm going to meet up with a couple of my friends. We're going to go out for breakfast, maybe just bullshit and talk about nothing, but it's just nice to be around people. So that might be something that helps them control their emotional health. Then you have mental health, and this is something where like, maybe per day, you have to make sure you feel like you're moving forward towards personal goals or work-related goals or family goals, and that allows you to feel more mentally stable, that attention is being paid to the things that are most important to you. And then relational health is paying the most attention to the people who are most important to you. Are we doing a good job of prioritizing our time and attention in our relationships? Am I giving more attention to my coworker than I am my spouse? Not a good thing, right? Or if I'm always kind of choosing work over my kids, not a good thing. So sometimes that's what we have to do, and that's what we talk about in podcast 251, drop the right ball. Sometimes you have to let one or two things slip, focus on a certain area for a short period of time, then pick the other things back up. The key is you have to pick them back up. Okay, you can't just drop your physical health and then never pay attention to it for 20 years. It doesn't work well. Okay, so then spiritual, or if you're not a religious-based person, spiritual doesn't automatically mean religion, but that's usually what people think, is just kind of the bigger picture, feeling connected with the universe, feeling connected with your life purpose, that kind of stuff. Like get outside of yourself, outside of your little realm, and feel like you're paying enough attention to the bigger picture, the grand scheme of things in life. Okay, so what we would want to do is make sure we include part of our weekly planning. What am I doing this week towards my physical health? What am I doing this week towards my emotional, towards my mental, towards my relational, towards my spiritual health? And did what I do last week feel like it was adequate? Maybe I didn't give enough attention to one of the things. I allocated some time, but it wasn't the right amount of time, or maybe it was the wrong thing. So maybe for my emotional health, I decided to meet friends on a Saturday night, last week. But all of a sudden I found out, like, oh, that kind of just didn't work well. Like, everybody was just bitching and whining about things, and I didn't feel better after that experience. I actually felt like more worn out. So maybe this week I need more personal time or me time, or maybe just meeting with one friend who seems to always be more positive. Or you can even tell your friends, get this, you can actually do this. This is a real thing. You can tell your friends, hey, I want to meet up, but I don't want to bitch about things. Let's not, like, whine about life. Let's think about something fun. Okay? And you can even look up topics for discussion. You would be amazed how many people in your life would be super duper freaking excited with that idea. Hey, let's cast aside all our bullshit worries and let's just have a fun moment. Now, sometimes people do need to talk about their worries. They need to vent. Okay? That is sometimes appropriate. But sometimes it's also appropriate to not do that. To not dwell in the mess of life and just release yourself from that. So tell your friends, like, hey, let's go for a walk on Saturday morning. But, and it can even be like, let's go for a walk on Saturday morning, and let's just take 20 minutes and just, let's bitch about everything. Let's just get out everything that we want to get out. You know, let's talk shit on our spouse. Like, not that you're wanting, like, that you should do that. But, like, take a moment and vent. Take a moment and just be pissed off about stuff. And then cut it. So sometimes you need that release. Some people do. Sometimes people just need to be away from negativity. So you could say, hey, let's go for a walk Saturday morning, but I don't want to talk about, like, kids. I don't want to talk about money. I don't want to talk about work. Let's just talk about something fun. And then the other person will be like, oh, okay, cool. You both might have not a freaking clue what to talk about because you normally don't talk about stuff fun. So, but you can see, like, hey, what's the last movie you went and saw? So it sounds goofy, but you can ask icebreaker questions for dating. You can ask that among friends. So what would you, like, questions you'd ask a date is like, hey, what's, like, your 3 favorite movies? Or what's a book that you read that made an impact in your life? Just talk about stuff like that. Sometimes that's what you need to do, okay? So that's what you want to do for mental stress, okay, is paying attention to worry. If you worry a lot, go listen to podcast 215. Release yourself from the worries, okay? Focus on what you can control and then control it. Plan ahead for it. Plan like weekly, daily, reflect on if the planning you're doing is actually working. That's a big thing. So, and like we said, make sure you pay attention to all areas of your health. Make sure you're doing something in your physical, emotional, mental, relational, and spiritual health that allow you to feel balanced and that you feel kind of overall a well-being over yourself. Okay? Cool. So like I said, this is fast stuff, but hopefully it's helpful to give you at least an idea of where to look if you're having stress issues, okay? So physical stress, life behaviors, anger management. So often people have a lot of stress, a lot of cortisol issues, and just kind of feeling worn out in life because you're freaking pissed off at everything and everybody. So some of that comes from not being balanced in our health areas, so that's going to help. And then also, if you're not sleeping right, you're going to feel freaking drained and tired and just have no good energy. If you're not eating right, that's not going to help either. You're just going to feel hungry and pissed off all day. So anger management becomes something that's very important, okay? So work on what your issue is. If your issue is someone else, say, okay, first of all, have I been eating right and have I been sleeping right? Because maybe I'm just being a diva and I'm oversensitive to what the hell's going on. So make sure your sleep is good. Make sure your food is good. Look at yourself first, okay? If you think, hey, you know what? I'm sleeping right. I'm eating right. I'm being physically active. I'm taking my me time. This person's just a dick. Okay? So if that's the case, then speak up. So the phrase, speak it, don't suppress it. Okay? Talk about what's going on. Bring it to their attention. If you don't bring it to their attention, it will eat you up. Okay? You're well aware of it because you're probably in that state already. Has doing nothing and saying nothing, has it changed anything? No. They're probably the same butthead they've been since the first day you got pissed off at them. Okay? So you have to speak it, not suppress it. So find a way to start talking about it. Bring some light to it. Okay? I can't go into full podcast mode here about anger management. I'll maybe have to make its own podcast. But that's what you want to do, is if you have anger over things, find out how you can address it. Is there something you can do without the other person having to be involved? First of all, do that. Okay? So if there's a way you can fix it on your own, just do it on your own, because that way you don't have to rely on somebody else. Now, if you do have to get somebody else involved, we have done a podcast in the past called Think before you speak, where we talk about whether something's, true, or are you saying it in an honest way? Is it inspiring rather than being like negative and like picking the shit out of people, like nagging them. So Think Before You Speak is a good podcast we've done in the past. That if you do have to bring up stuff that is tough to say, that'll help you find out how to formulate it, how to kind of like get a better chance at saying it in a way that it'll be received well. Okay? So if you have anger management issues, fix that shit. Okay? Just sitting there swallowing it and suppressing it over time, it doesn't hurt anybody else but you. You just get hurt more and more and more. Okay? Now, sleep management. Sleep is very important. If you're not sleeping well, you're going to be super stressed. Okay? Not only physically but mentally, and it's just not good for the body, even in hormonal profile. So sleep management is very important. So having a nighttime like kind of routine is a good idea. So it sounds all corny, and we've all heard variations of this, but like in terms of like a blue light, like staring at your phone or staring at a computer, it is a good idea to get away from that a little bit before you go to bed. So like some people recommend 2 hours before, some people recommend 3 hours before. Chances are everybody is going to be staring at their phone until they pass out. And it's often because we use our phone as kind of like our alarm clock. We use it for a bunch of other things. So it's hard to get away from that. But something I do is I have my nightly routines that I told you about, where I kind of look at plan my day. I try to go through and reflect on the day. I do that stuff before I go to bed, and I do it on paper rather than in my phone. So that way it gets me away from my phone. I'll often also listen to podcasts on either like YouTube or like Podbean or something like that, where I'll play the podcast, but I'll have my phone sitting beside me on the bed rather than me staring at it. So that helps some. Also, we have daily reflections, like we said, which is kind of like ways to kind of clear your mind. So we want to be able to do that as much as we can. Try to get stress out of our mind. So that way we can clear our mind and get to be able to fall asleep faster. So other things we want to pay attention to is light in the room. So some people are very sensitive to light, so they can wear like a night mask, kind of like shades over their eyes. You can also just try to like black out the room, but a night shade is much more effective. So we also have sound. Like I said, I actually like having some sound to fall asleep to. So I'll listen to a podcast because it helps me kind of focus on something. It gives me a sense of like something to kind of pay attention to. And then it lets me not have my mind wander so much because I'm giving it something to do. So that actually makes me feel better in control. Some people, though, they like having earplugs in and they don't want to hear anything. So that helps them fall asleep. Other people, temperature in the room makes a big difference. You have to make sure it's slightly chilled. So that way you can kind of you feel a cooler temperature allows you to fall asleep better, fall asleep faster than being hot and stuffy and sweaty. So that's a big thing as well. And then another thing is touch. So our skin is actually awake while you're sleeping. So if something were to crawl up your arm, you will feel it and you will wake up. So that's why often people will recommend to sleep with a light blanket on of some sort. And that's another reason why it's good to have the room temperature down. But sleeping with something on a blanket where it's a consistent feel on your skin, that helps a lot. So that way there's not just like the random air flowing throughout the room kind of messing up your skin. And all these things matter to some degree. Each person on the planet is affected in different degrees in different ways. So when I talk to clients, I've had some people who felt like each one of these was a make or break issue, but another one of them meant nothing to them. But that is something we want to pay attention to as a nighttime routine to help us get better quality of sleep. And then nutrition management. So we've listened to enough podcasts that you probably know by now what is needed for nutrition, so I don't have to go into that. But in general, we want to not have to live off caffeine and sugar. So you want to be eating enough actual real food to give you the energy that you need throughout the day. And you want to be eating healthy foods rather than sugars. So if you take a lot of caffeine and you just consume a lot of sugar throughout the day, that's going to leave your cortisol levels feeling really high as well. Okay? The last thing we want to cover is hormonal stress. So there are supplements you can take, like there are things called cortisol blockers, and I have had clients take those at different periods of time, and they've found them to be effective. The problem was they were only effective for temporary moments. So if they were having temporary issues, it's something that helped kind of like calm the storms while the storm was there, but you can't take a cortisol blocker for the rest of your life. It's not healthy, okay? So there probably are some medical exceptions on that, but in general, for most people listening to this podcast, cortisol blockers have had a history of working. Some people like them and swear by them, but they're not a long-term fix, okay? Just like a diet where we lose 30 pounds in 30 days, yeah, you're going to lose 30 pounds in 30 days, sure, if the diet works, but there's no way in hell you're keeping the 30 pounds off because it wasn't lost in the correct way, right? We can't lose 30 pounds in 30 days in a healthy manner. So just like we can't take a cortisol blocker and still live our life, no sleep, poor food nutrition, being pissed off at everybody, and think that that's going to just fix everything for us. So we have to still fix our regular life and take care of what we need to take care of. Now, as for hormones, so getting blood tests or wondering if your hormone profile is incorrect or if that might be an issue for you, okay? For women, there's a book that I think is a good resource, and it's called The Secret Female Hormone by Kathy, I don't know how to say her last name, Maupin. It's Maupin. Okay, Kathy, Maupin. The book is titled The Female Hormone, and it's about testosterone and other hormones, but it's really good information that you can do some research yourself, learn a little bit about the benefits of hormones and what your balance should be. For men, a book I read that I liked was The Youth Effect by Dr. Brown. Okay, The Youth Effect is the name, and that one again just kind of explains the benefits and the roles of the different hormones of the body. So if you feel like you're eating well, you're being physically active appropriately, you're kind of sleeping okay, you don't feel like you have anger issues, and you feel like you're kind of well balanced in life, it's just, man, like cortisol's high, I feel like shit all the time, just don't feel like myself, I just feel off. You can get blood tests done, okay, and then see if your hormone profile is out of whack. Educate yourself before you go talk to somebody. So read those books I gave you before you go talk to somebody. If you talk to a general practitioner or doctor, they often don't know shit about hormones. I guarantee it's going to offend somebody. But the people who've gotten their degrees and are practicing now, hormone education, like hormone control, was not part of their education. So anything that they would know, they would have to have looked it up on their own extra. And very rarely do people have time to do that if they're a general practitioner. So they will have an opinion, and I have worked with clients for years, and oh my gosh, over 100 people, well over 100 people. And overwhelmingly, the general practitioners don't know shit, and what they think they know is ridiculously off. And their advice is usually detrimental more than it actually is even benign. Like they actually give poor advice that'll hurt somebody more than they give advice that doesn't do anything. So we tend to try to find hormone specialists in the local area of the client, and that tends to be a much, much, much better process. And we have them read these books, so that way when they go talk to the hormone specialist, they can kind of be prepared for what experiences they've had, where they think their treatment needs to go, and then the hormone specialist will kind of fill in the gaps and talk to them there. But if you go in with no education whatsoever, you'll have no clue if that person's telling you a good thing or a bad thing. And just because they're a doctor does not mean they know what the hell they're talking about. So we've talked before that doctors should not give nutrition advice. Doctors should not give training advice because they are not educated in that stuff at all. So I've talked to somebody recently about a chiropractor gave them exercise advice, and that chiropractor didn't know shit about exercise. And I was just so dumbfounded that the chiropractor would do that, because the advice they gave was actually incorrect. It was horrible advice. But they thought they were telling the client something well-meaning and good. However, they had no education and no experience to back that up. So I have no clue what in their brain made them feel like they were justified in what they said. So make sure if you're going to go talk to somebody, they're actually a hormone specialist, they're educated in the area that you want the help in. Okay? Cool. So I'm not going to go to a foot doctor to get help with my brain. Okay? So make sure you go to a hormone specialist if you want help with hormones. This was very fast, but it still took 30 minutes. But hopefully it raised some awareness to areas that we need to consider when we're looking at controlling or kind of like stress levels and controlling cortisol. Okay, so the person who asked for this information, hopefully this is what you wanted. If you have any more specific questions, email us at brutalirongym@gmail.com. Okay, but hopefully this is good to get you started, and